Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Whitaker, trauma specialist, and today's topic is the cycle of narcissistic abuse. And this is a cycle that you're going to identify with pretty quickly if you have been in a relationship where you've experienced narcissistic abuse or emotional abuse from your partner. And if you haven't been in such a situation, this might not resonate with you at all. So let's go ahead and get started. In the cycle of narcissistic abuse, the first stage is idealization. And idealization is the stage when the victim will experience immense flattery. They might be on the receiving end of gifts and all kinds of kindness and helping and generous behaviors from the narcissist. So it's a time of excessive attention in order to win your heart. And the idealization stage is one that weakens the victim's defense mechanisms. And before they know it, they're drawn into a whirlwind romance, maybe without even realizing it. And this is actually a form of grooming that primes the victim, their friends and family to trust and commit to the abuser. The victim's empathy is engaged by the narcissist, and this accelerates bonding, loyalty, and attachment in the relationship. The abuser will feign love while simultaneously planting seeds of self-doubt in the victim to foster emotional dependency and to secure power and control in the relationship. The abuser invests in the victim to instill a sense of gratitude, so the victim feels obligated to the abuser. I owe him so much for all he's done to me. Look how generous he is. Look how much help he's given me. So that sense of obligation is really important for the narcissist to instill during the grooming phase. And during this phase, the victim feels really special and lucky to have been chosen. There's intense love, trust, and sexual desire, because this is the honeymoon phase of the relationship when things are really hot and heavy. And due to the honeymoon phase, the victim is going to experience increased levels of dopamine and serotonin in their brain, and that impacts the victim's experience, and everything about the relationship feels happy and hopeful and euphoric. And there's just this sense of, wow, this is it. This is the perfect relationship. I have finally met my soulmate or my twin flame. And just as a hint, those terms can be red flags in relationships, especially if you are in the love bombing phase and there's this talk about, oh yes, we've had past lives together and we find each other in every lifetime. And that can be a form of grooming. So just know that that can be a red flag. Now, the victim may feel a sense of owing the abuser for their generosity, which causes the victim to rationalize and minimize the inappropriate red flag behaviors exhibited by the narcissist. The victim justifies, makes excuses for, enables, and even defends the narcissist's words and abusive behaviors to family and friends by putting them in context and having compassion. Now, don't get me wrong, compassion isn't a bad thing. It's actually necessary for healing trauma. However, when we aren't boundaried with our compassion around who and in what ways we express compassion, and if we aren't discerning around who we show compassion to, it can really backfire and bite us in the butt, especially if we show too much compassion to a narcissist, because they don't respond well to that. And so toward the end of the idealization stage, the victim may find themselves beginning to isolate, beginning to ignore their own personal boundaries, and modifying their own behaviors to align more with the narcissist's needs, preferences, and desires. So before I go on to the evaluation stage, I just want to say welcome if you're new to the community. And if you've been here before, welcome back. It's such an honor to have you back here. I'm glad my videos are helping. I encourage you to like, subscribe, and share. And on YouTube, be sure to hit that bell because my videos all interrelate. So let's go back to stage 2. And stage 2 is the devaluation stage. And this is the stage where the admiration ceases to exist, and it's replaced by verbal and emotional abuse, often disguised as trying to help the victim. Like, why can't you be like her, for example? And this phase starts to include cruel, degrading, and condescending comments, often disguised as sarcasm or jokes. I mean, why are you so sensitive? Can't you take a joke? Victims might feel confusion, they doubt themselves, and this is the phase where their self-esteem and their sense of self-worth starts to plummet. In the devaluation stage, the narcissist is wounded when the victim responds in normal ways to inappropriate and abusive behaviors. The narcissist is going to feel threatened, betrayed, and victimize themselves, which causes them to get defensive in an attempt to regain control over the victim. The abuser or the narcissist will provoke insecurity in their victim using things like triangulation, comparing the victim to other people. And comparing to other people could be like, oh, why can't you be like our neighbor's wife? She is just so solid. And look at you. You're so neurotic. You just can't help it. Look how pathetic you are. So these comparing to other people, or why can't you be like her? Why can't you do like she's doing? And the narcissist might even start flirting and possibly even engaging in infidelity during this stage. And all of this provokes insecurity in the victim by making the victim feel replaceable. So it's an attempt to destabilize the victim by causing them to doubt their reality and question their sanity. And gaslighting is a tactic that narcissists use starting in this phase. The abuser becomes bored with the victim, and they may look for a new source of validation and stimulation, which is where the flirting and possibly infidelity comes in. So they're searching for that new source of perfection. And this could lead to grooming and love bombing a new victim. The narcissist will use the victim's distress in their current relationship as a way to garner sympathy from others, to justify their abusive behaviors, to justify their dismissals of their victim's claims, and to justify their betrayals of the victim. Now, keep in mind, this quest to garner support is how flying monkeys are recruited. So if you missed my video on flying monkeys, you might want to circle back and watch that one. And now in this stage, in the devaluation stage, the victim or survivor of the abuse is devalued and punished for inconveniencing the narcissist by trying to set boundaries, or by trying to call out unacceptable or abusive behaviors, or for not being obedient or complacent enough. The levels of dopamine and serotonin plummet during this stage. And as a result, the victim may experience depression, anxiety, an intense feeling of fear inside themselves, decreasing levels of self-worth, increasing levels of self-doubt. There might be more confusion and memory problems. The victim could experience sleep disturbances. And the longer the victim is in the relationship, the cognitive dissonance sets in, because the cognitive dissonance is one thing that keeps them in the relationship. And there is a disconnect in the victim from their intuition and their gut feelings. They no longer trust it, so they don't listen to it anymore. And they may also feel cut off from a sense of reality and from a sense of feeling grounded within themselves. The victim may begin to placate the abuser by walking on eggshells around them, or going along to get along, which again, these are things that can be very dangerous in narcissistically abusive relationships. The victim is groomed by this point to blame themselves for all the problems in the relationship. So they're working harder to try to please the narcissist in an attempt to regain the narcissist's attention and get back to the love they felt when the relationship was new in that idealization stage. The victim may become hypervigilant to the narcissist's mood swings. So they'll try to predict the narcissist's need for affection and connection in order to avoid any further conflict. So they're trying to be, like those other women that they compare me to. Okay, you want me to be like her? I'm going to try. And it never seems to work. The victim might also experience fog. Fog stands for feelings of fear, obligation, and guilt. Fog. And that keeps them in a state of denying their own intuition in lieu of clinging to hope that things are going to change. And so this is the type of relationship where hope becomes a beggar. Now, the third stage in the cycle of abuse is discard. And during the discard phase, the victim's usefulness to the abuser has pretty much ceased. The abuser may have found a new supply at this point, or someone or something to replace the victim and to fulfill their needs. The victim is tossed aside like garbage and tormented as if the love between them never existed in the first place. So this is the stage where instead of "you are perfect" or "what's wrong with you? Why can't you be like her?" it becomes "you mean nothing to me." So in this stage, the narcissist acts defensively against the pain of the narcissistic wound. And this is because the narcissist isn't able to discern between "I did something bad" and "I am bad." So their feelings of shame and insecurity are unconsciously projected onto their victim because they can't handle their own internal emotions. So it gets just toxically projected out ad infinitum. And this projection often escalates into their abusive behaviors. So when the victim responds to the abuse by expressing their emotions and how it feels to be on the receiving end of the narcissist's behavior, the narcissist is actually repelled by that, and they see the emotions as weakness. And they become disgusted by the emotions. So the narcissist may love bomb or groom a new victim entirely during this stage. And he may feel energized by having a new source of narcissistic supply. And this will leave the narcissist or the abuser feeling empowered, entitled, and in control, especially when the victim's response to the abuse or the betrayal becomes proof to other people, especially their flying monkeys, that the victim is crazy, insane, unwell, and somehow that justifies the abuse, the betrayal, and the discard. The narcissist is able to get sympathy for having to put up with such a crazy partner, and this is how they gain power and control over the victim and the relationship narrative. The victim is further punished for responding to the narcissist's abusive behaviors. So from the victim's standpoint, they may attempt to remain calm, to reason with the narcissist, and the victim may apologize for her emotional responses to the abuse. She may assume all the blame and all the responsibility for what went wrong in the relationship. And the victim might be the one to try to fix the relationship, and she may even try to prove her sanity to the narcissist and his flying monkeys. And when this doesn't work, the victim will become even more emotionally distressed, and the victim could appear unhinged in response to the narcissistic gaslighting, which that crazy making unhinged is how the narcissist justifies what he is doing to the victim. So the victim may attempt to anticipate the abuse and modify their behavior even more to avoid conflict and escalation of the abuse. And the hope is that if I do this right, if I could just get this right, then the narcissist will return to the love bombing stage, which is that euphoric stage which started all of this to begin with. And then finally, the last stage, which may or may not happen, is called hoovering. And this is the stage when the abuser attempts to draw the victim back into the relationship, and they will do this using any means necessary. The narcissist might beg, they might cry, they might get down on their knees, they might guilt trip the victim. They might project. They might shift blame. If you didn't do that, I wouldn't have to do this. So there can be a lot of different things that happen in the hoovering stage, but what's most insidious is the hoovering stage could potentially be hard to distinguish from the idealization stage. And so this is where it gets to, please come back. I promise it'll be different. That happened because of the situation we were in. We're not in that situation anymore. I promise it's going to be different this time. So that tends to be what highlights this fourth stage. And like I said, the fourth stage may or may not happen. During this fourth stage, some victims, or even during the third stage, after the third stage, the discard, some victims may leave or attempt to leave the narcissist. And if the narcissist ends up feeling discarded because of how they treated the victim and the victim left, this means that the narcissist has lost control of the relationship and the relationship narrative. So hoovering could be a way to regain control of the relationship and the narrative. And something that could determine whether or not a narcissist engages in the hoovering stage is whether or not the narcissist has found a new narcissistic supply. If he happened to engage in infidelity during the previous stage, he may have already groomed a new victim for his narcissistic supply. And if that relationship is currently in the idealization or love bombing stage, then he may not actually hoover his previous victim. So even if he's found a new victim, the narcissist may still attempt to control the narrative with his flying monkeys. So this can be, different for every person, but at the same time, I'm curious, do you see yourself in this cycle of abuse? Have you been in it before? How long have you been out of it? What helped you get out? Feel free to comment below. I would love to hear from you. And if you have found value from understanding the cycle of narcissistic abuse and how that goes, please comment below and please like, share, and subscribe. All right, everyone, I will see you next time. Happy self-discovery.